In this video, we'll see how to create a function that will count the number of conflicts that a proposed appointment has. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look at some of the data that we have here. So this should list all of the appointments for the 2nd of June. And here we have 32 different appointments. Now it's really fairly difficult to be able to look at this and answer the question, does a particular proposed appointment have any conflicts? It's pretty tough to see. So let's go ahead and visualize that graphically. And so let's suppose that we are proposing, there's a requested appointment for this day, the 2nd of June, to start at 10:30 and go for 55 minutes. As we look at these different appointments, we can see that each one of these bars then represents one of the records from our query. And so looking at this graphically, it's much easier to see that this proposed appointment is going to potentially conflict, depending on who the counselor is going to potentially conflict with several of these. So Quinn's got an appointment that would have the exact overlap, as does James. And so that conflict's actually pretty easy to see by looking at the data because it has the same start time and the same duration. Elizabeth has two conflicts, one that starts much earlier but ends during the new proposed appointment, and she has one that starts during the proposed appointment. Abigail has a conflict as well. This one's a little bit different because it starts before the proposed appointment and ends after the proposed appointment. And so we'll have to consider all of those potential kinds of conflicts. Those that begin and end at the same time, those that end during the proposed appointment, those that begin during the proposed appointment, and those that begin before the appointment and end after the appointment. And so it's not really a very easy question to ask, even once we have it spelled out and know what we're doing. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the appointment that we're going to try to add. So we're going to try to add an appointment for Elizabeth Baker as the counselor on June 3rd, beginning at June 2nd, beginning at 10:30 and going 55 minutes. And so let's go ahead and just start to take a look at the data. So we'll write a query that says, I want to see all of the appointments. And the first category I'm going to choose is where the start time is within the boundaries of our new proposed appointment. So I will say where the start time is between our newly proposed appointment time, and I'll just use a date literal there, and the newly proposed end time, which I'll have to add 55 minutes to the start time. And to do that, I will use the add minutes function that we built in a prior example. And so there's a video on building this add minutes function, but it is included in the script that gets the data set up for this example. So the add minutes function takes a starting time, date and time, and then a number of minutes. And so that what this query should say is, show me all the existing appointments that have a start time between the beginning time of our newly proposed appointment and the ending time of our newly proposed appointment. And let's see what that returns. Now, because we're using the between operator, then we actually get ones that are exactly the same as well as in between the starting and ending boundaries. And so that gives us the two that had exactly the same start and end times, 10:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., and 55 minutes, as well as the one that starts during the duration between 10:30 and 11:25. So this one shows up as being starting in that boundary. So we should be able to take the next example, which is to find those that end during the boundary. And so this one will start out the same, but instead of looking where the start time is between two other boundaries, we're going to look for existing appointments where the end time is between the two other boundaries. And those other two boundaries will be the same. And again, because we're using between, we should be able to pick up the two that have exactly the same time should show up in this one as well. But now instead of seeing Elizabeth's 11 o'clock appointment, we should see her 9 o'clock appointment. And we do. So we see the appointment that starts at 9 o'clock for her, and we still have the two for James and Quinn. So we need another query then to find out those that where existing records where the start time is less than the proposed start time, and the existing end time is greater than the proposed end time. And that gives us just the one that Abigail had that started pretty early. It started at 10 a.m. and goes for almost 2 hours. So now we just need to take these three queries and bring them together into a single query. And so we'll take our first query, add an OR, and then bring the where clause in from the second query, add an OR, and bring the where clause in from the third query. All we've done is bring these queries together and execute them as a single query. And so now we've found all 5 of those conflicts. Only thing we have to do now is to add in another constraint to limit this just to the counselor that we're trying to schedule, and that counselor is Elizabeth Baker. So we'll go ahead and bring that whole query back in and add an AND with a restriction that restricts that just to Elizabeth. So we did have to bind all of these ORs together with an opening parenthesis and a closing parenthesis, and then we could bring that AND clause in. Okay, now what we're trying to do is build a function from this that's going to return the number of conflicts. And so we don't need to bring all this information back. So instead of saying select star, we'll say select count star, and might as well give it a name right here for us to look at. And then we'll bring in the rest of that query. And we should be able to execute that and see the number. So here are the 2 conflicts that Elizabeth would have if she were to take that appointment that's scheduled for 10:30 a.m. and goes for 55 minutes. Well, now we're ready to go ahead and create the function that implements this. So we will start with create a replace function. We'll give it a name. It'll be the conflict count function. And we're going to take in 3 parameters. The first parameter we're going to take in is going to be the information about when the proposed appointment begins. And so we'll call that P start time, and the type will be date. We'll bring in a duration as an integer, and we'll also bring in the name of the counselor as a variable length character string. Once we have that, we're ready to establish the return type of the function. This function is going to return an integer. And we're ready to now establish any variables that we need. Only need one, a variable called count that will be an integer that allows us to count the number of records that that query is going to return. And we can go ahead and build the function now with our beginning our begin block. So we will select count of the records into our variable from the appointment table, and this query now is going to be the same, except instead of having the date specified literally, I will just read in the start time and the duration that are passed into the function. So we're looking for existing records where the start time is between the specified start time and the end time. So we'll take the start time and add the duration to it in minutes. And then we'll bring in the rest of the query similarly adjusted, where we're looking at the parameterized versions of the start time and end time. And you'll see that we've also used the parameter for the counselor here as well. At that point, we're ready to just return the value that was read into the vCount variable. That should let us end the function and execute the create function statement. So the function's created. We should be able to see how it works by selecting conflict count and passing our same literals back into it. So this will be the start day and time, specify 55 minutes, and that we're trying to schedule this for Elizabeth Baker. We'll go ahead and give that a name and select it from Dual. And we'll see that tells us, in fact, there are 2 conflicts for Elizabeth. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that list of appointments for that day again. And let's take a look at it graphically as well. So we could schedule this for Elizabeth. Elizabeth's got a pretty busy day, but she could take this appointment beginning at 4 o'clock. So why don't we go ahead and change that schedule, change that appointment to run at 4 o'clock, and make sure that it returns that there are no conflicts in that situation. So we'll select conflict count, specifying now the 4 o'clock start time on that same day, and the rest of the parameters to be exactly the same. And we'll see that the function tells us there are no conflicts. In other words, we're able to schedule the appointment for that time. Well, that's creating a function to be able to return the number of conflicts in the schedule.